Broadcasting live from sunny California, it's 10 Minutes in Tinseltown with Ms. Meliz, a.k.a. Melissa Reyes. And now, from the left corner, your host, the Melissa Reyes.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to this special episode of Tinseltown today. And I have live in the studio with me, Mr. Gary Alvarez.
Hello, everyone.
And he's sitting right across my desk. And we are getting ready to just have a conversation and talk about how we met and what he's doing and a little about social awareness, because I'm very intrigued with a lot of his work in the community and his beliefs on that. So is that okay with you, Gary?
Yeah, when I saw your Facebook page about social awareness, I was like, oh, this is going to be a heavy conversation.
Well, I'm not really about heavy conversations, but there should be heavy conversations.
Right.
Okay, so I want people to know that I'm open to that, and that because I'm not very openly opinionated doesn't mean that I'm not socially aware. So when I see somebody who's active in that way, I want to just soak up the information and show you my enthusiasm and my how I want to back you 100% in what you're doing, because somebody has to do that.
Right.
So tell me about yourself and I'll introduce you. And this is Gary Alvarez. Tell us about yourself.
Oh, wow. Where do I start? Well, I'm a filmmaker. I write and direct and produce now. I'm originally from Bell, California, my hometown. Maybe you've heard of it. It was in the news about 5 years ago. There was a political corruption scandal. This feedback.
Yeah, I know. It's just weird.
It's kind of throwing me off.
Nobody else has it. Okay, hold on. We'll pause for a second. Sorry, people. Zerlene? Yeah, exactly. That's why you heard it, or we heard it and you didn't. So Cindy, you're awesome. So we could have gone the whole time with that, but it just would have been extremely uncomfortable for us.
Yeah.
So this is so much better. All right. So Gary, you were telling me a little bit about your work and what you do as a filmmaker.
Right. Just to get back to where I was. So I am an independent filmmaker. I write, produce, and direct. And I went to Chapman University. Did their MFA program, graduated in 2012. I've been making films for about a little over 10 years now, primarily narrative. I'm getting into the documentary genre. Mm-hmm. I have a feature documentary that's in pre-production right now that's going to start shooting in the summer. And my background, just to step back a little bit, I'm originally from Bell, California. It was in the news. Right around 2010, a big political corruption scandal broke out. The city manager was making more money than the president of the United States. I must say that he's crazy. Not originally from Bell. He's from Orange County, and he had a home, a mansion in Newport, and a horse ranch in Seattle. And basically, he was raping the town, the homeowners of the town. If you've ever been to Bell, it's a small little place, 2 miles, I think. Mostly Mexican, working class, Spanish-speaking neighborhood, and him and his cohorts in the city council and his inner circle were making millions of dollars. And unfortunately, when the story broke, I was in film school, so I was too busy with my school projects to do anything about it in terms of film. But I made it a point to keep tabs because I knew once I was done with film school that I would come back and make a film about it, a documentary. So that's kind of where I'm at right now in terms of that particular project. So I grew up in Bell, 19 years, from 1980 to 1999. And I left to go to college, did my undergrad at UC Berkeley. I managed to graduate early. Basically, I was able to skip a year because I had enough AP credits that I had like 29 credits, I think, before I even stepped foot on campus for my high school days. And that spare time allowed me to study abroad. I went to Mexico City, and I studied abroad at UNAM, primarily history.
Where's that? Where's UNAM? Is that
UNAM is in Mexico City. It's the oldest. It stands for Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico,
okay.
which is one of the biggest and one of the oldest universities south of the border. At the time, they had just gotten through a major strike, a student strike, and so actually my semester there was the first semester back, and the school was still recovering from that. And as if you can imagine, a university just completely shutting down. There's students still camping out, and it was a mess, a bureaucratic mess. But the experience was a priceless one. I got to explore the city, reconnect with my roots. It was the first time I had been in an urban part of Mexico. My mom's from a small town called Tecuala, which is in the state of Nayarit on the west coast. And to go from this little pueblo, growing up and going there and visiting my grandma over the years, to going to the biggest city on the planet, just blew my mind and blew me away. And it was a total eye-opener. Being a 20-year-old kid in the biggest city on the planet has a way of making an impression on you. And so I did my studies abroad, and then I went back to Berkeley and finished up my BA there, and I graduated in 2002. I moved back to Bell very briefly when my dad got sick. He passed away from pancreatic cancer that year. And, I stuck around for Bell for a little bit to help out around the house. And eventually I ended up moving to Long Beach to pursue a teaching credential. That didn't materialize, but I stuck around in Long Beach while I was teaching for down at Unified, where I went to school. I went to middle school and to high school in Downey. And then I came back and I started teaching there. I didn't really have originally plans on becoming a teacher. It was just one of those things that, for lack of a better phrase, kind of fell into my lap. And I did at that time already have that sense of giving back to the community. So it wasn't like, it wasn't a big jump for me, but I knew one way or another I was going to do something to give back to the school system and the school district that helped me to get to Berkeley in the first place.
That's so much. I'm like trying to process everything you're telling me, and it's awesome. I love it. Go ahead, take a sip of your water. You totally deserve it. I feel like you jumped around a little bit, so let's go backtrack a little. So starting with your films that you're producing and working on now, how long have you been doing that?
Well, for this particular project, it's been development for about 5 years.
And which one is that?
This is the tentative working title is called Power, Corruption, and Lies.
And that's about the Bell?
The Bell documentaries.
Okay.
The Bell political corruption scandal, which I'm producing and directing into a feature doc. I don't know how long that's going to take. My experience just with other documentaries and people who have worked on them, their labor of love. They often take years, and I'm prepared to do that. I wasn't at the time when I was in film school just because of the workload. So, I'm giving myself at least 12 months to work on that, but I'm anticipating more time than that. And that's okay. It's a labor of love. It's my hometown, and I wanted to put Bell on the map, but not for these reasons.
I'm curious, we see the news and they tell you what their views, and it's so skewed from what's really happening. And I didn't realize that as much until this Porter Ranch gas leak thing, that even when I told you that's where I live, your first reaction was, is it safe?
Right.
Because you hear what's on the news. And literally, I would be anticipating watching the news, expecting to hear good news, because I would get the information straight from the gas company, straight from the neighborhood, knowing what's happening and expecting them to report on that. Yet they would take like one or two words from the entire document and just continue with this story that was so untrue. And it bothered me so much. And I thought, okay, nothing I hear on the news will ever be the same to me, because I experienced that firsthand of it just being just so blatantly wrong. And I tweeted that, how disappointed I was in those newscasters for reporting such such fallacy, because even though the facts were true about how it started, they never really went into detail about when it was over. They just milked the story as long as they could. So that makes me second guess the Bell experience from what I saw. But like what you said, that they were paying themselves so much more than, and that you're getting away with it. But what ended up happening, they all went to jail, didn't they?
Robert Rizzo, who was a city manager, he's in jail right now. Some of those cohorts of his that were closest to him are in jail. Not all of them, unfortunately. I don't know the full story, which is part of my learning experience through this project.
Get the truth, right?
Yeah, I would like to get to the truth. But I also, in my brainstorm of this project, I also want to bring in the positivity, what came out of it. So yes, it's going to focus on, the timeline and Robert Rizzo, and it's going to focus on, I have a couple questions primarily, like how did this happen? And how was he able to get away with it for so long? And then also, unfortunately, there were some local residents that were involved. It's one of those situations where power corrupts, and those close who are going to benefit took advantage of their neighbors, really.
So they were living large, right? In a community that was suffering poverty, and they were just sucking them dry, and for 10 years. Spending that money. And it was in the millions.
In Seattle.
Wow. Yeah. Just living, and it's just so, it's hard. Like, even I've got that like awkward smile on my face. Like my face is smiling, but inside I'm thinking, why am I smiling? This is a horrible thing. But it's because it's so hard to believe for me, that someone can do that and not, I'd like just keep doing it until they got caught, I guess. It's corrupt. It's corruption. And it's sickening, really.
Yeah, some journalists from the LA Times broke the story, and they eventually went on to win a Pulitzer from that.
Wow.
So I'm hoping to capitalize on there's already an audience for this particular story.
Right.
And I'm trying to find a way to transition it from the news and the print onto film.
What motivates you to do that? I think I know what you're going to say about, because you touched a little bit on it, but your feelings about Bell and the community, and that's where you lived and grew up and your parents lived. But, why do you want to do this story?
It's funny you asked that, and I'm glad that you did, because when I left Bell, 19 years old, I remember that day very distinctly. I rented a U-Haul. And I packed all my belongings. The only thing that I left behind was the carpet in my bedroom. I had no intention of ever coming back. Not so much because I was, I hated my hometown or anything like that. It was, looking back, I think it had a lot more to do with the fact that I'm leaving the nest for the first time. I've been living in Los Angeles all my life, 19 years. And I got into UCLA, and I got into Berkeley, and I got into Cornell.
That's amazing, really.
But
it makes me so proud.
They weren't even my first choices, to be honest. My first choice was Stanford, and I thought I had gotten in to the point where I actually went to Stanford to visit the campus, and I bought a hoodie and everything. When I got that little envelope in the mail and said no, thank you, and then my second choice was Columbia. They said no, and then I looked at Cornell, where Cornell was on the map. And it was nowhere close to New York City. And I did some research, and I found out it's upstate New York, and it snows. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to go across the country, 19 years old, in the snow, growing up in sunny Southern California. So, and my brother had gone to UCLA, so I had considered that. But, I went to go visit the Berkeley campus, and I was it felt natural to me. Like, okay, this is where I should give Berkeley a chance. And, I fit right in. But getting back to your original question.
Yeah, what motivated you to do this story?
After I came back and visiting my home, it's a little 2-bedroom apartment. It's on 4732 Gage Avenue, apartment D. I still remember the address.
Never forget the address when you grow up. I don't either.
I would have, it was very nostalgic for me to go back and visit, all the places that I used to haunt as a kid. And even now, I was just there a couple of days ago for Teacher of the Year awards. And there's a feeling of wanting to do something for the community. I'm not sure I can't pinpoint it to an exact event or a person. It's just, it's embedded in my spirit. And that goes back to me just being socially conscious. And I've always wanted to leave something behind more than just the corpse. And, when I think of my hometown, it's my home, even on my Facebook page. I don't put Los Angeles like a lot of people do, even though I am an Angelino born and raised. Belle's my hometown. People ask me, where's Belle? Yeah. I'm like, it's on the 710. People are like, Belle Gardens? No. Bellflower? No. It's on the other side of the freeway. It's Belle.
Yeah, I would never have known where it was or if it weren't for that story when that came out. But so how much time had passed from when you left to go to college and when you went back? And were you finished with school at that point?
Yeah, I left in January of 1999 and I came back in May of 2002, very briefly when my dad got sick. And then I left again in February of 2003. Okay. And now that I go back, it's strange because after that political corruption scandal broke, the neighborhood, the community, is recovering. And I read an article where there's an art walk in the city of Belle.
That's good.
And it just blew my mind. I couldn't imagine an art walk.
Really?
So I did some research and I found out that people that were involved in that and organizing that art walk were kids from the neighborhood, teenagers and 20-something-year-olds who wanted to do something positive in order to heal the community. And part of that was the art walk. And then from that art walk, an open mic started called Alivio Open Mic by a young man. His name's Eric Esley. He started in his garage, in his parents' garage, and it just grew and it's blowing up. It's just celebrated its second anniversary earlier this year. And so now that I'm going back to do this documentary, I wanted to reach out to the locals and find out through their eyes, through the residents. I want to focus the documentary also more than the scandal itself, the impact that it had on the residents and how they responded. And part of it has to do with the youngsters. And Bella's changed a lot,
So when that happened, what year was it? When
the scandal
came down? Yeah.
It happened in 2010.
Okay. All right. So only 6 years ago. So they were teenagers.
Right.
And so now they're in their early 20s and they want to make their home better, better. I experienced a little bit of that renovation in bringing up a community. I lived and raised my children in Chatsworth. And I don't know if you're familiar with Chatsworth, but it's part of the North Valley, not far from here. And it's, a 150-year-old neighborhood and, a Western town, and it's very small and it's close to the freeway. There's a lot of crime in those little stores and, there's multiple malls nearby. So those little mom and pop stores are there's just people going in and out all the time. They, don't really, but there's this one little main street with some standard restaurants and shops that have been there forever. I'm sure the people own the property, so they stay. And so, the families, the young kids of these people who owned these stores, there's a restaurant and a club and there's a dentist and there's a silversmith. They do silver jewelry and just, a couple of other there's like a yoga place and, a couple little places and their tax place and, stuff like that. 7-Eleven on the corner. This was a few blocks, but they organized an art walk and they organized getting nicer benches and signs and, just really strung up lights and made it so that during the summer and the evening, so people can come out and go from the place to place and meet the owners and have some hospitality. And they, they did social media on it. And it just brought people out and about and brought up the community a little bit. And so I've seen that firsthand. And it was good because it was a time when I was already we had the Christmas parade down Main Street and different things like that were getting just so old and to me almost corrupt because it was always run by the same fundraising entity, which I won't name, that, that kind of did everything in the community and golf things and galas or whatever. And they were always sponsoring these things. And so it was always kind of just them and their friends. And I always felt like, where are the things that I'm involved in? Where are the things, that my kids are interested in instead of these same old, I'm not comfortable with making labels or generalizations, but they're just the same old white people,
Yeah, the establishment.
And so, it drove me a little nuts because you look around and see all the people, that's not who represents the neighborhood. So when this community of younger generation came up and did it and was so inclusive and so interested in loving their town, that it really, I noticed this happening in a couple of other places here in the Valley. So I guess what I'm just really saying is that even without a corruption scandal, that rejuvenation is so positive for our economy and for the people. And because even when there is negative things going on, you always love your home where you grew up. And if your parents stay there or you know people who stay there, even when you leave and come back like you've experienced, it's, people care. People care about where they grew up, no matter what it was like. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes out with your documentary, and I just commend you for doing that and for coming here and talking to me about it. So let's go back again to the project you did before you started working on this. What was that one?
Which one?
So
I have multiple ones.
I know you have. Well, let's talk about The Good Man. How long ago did you produce that?
A Good Man. That is a short film that I wrote and directed while I was at Chapman Film School.
Okay.
It's an a little over 8-minute film. Wow, that actually was, I submitted that script for a competition in film school. It was the most competitive contest at Chapman because it's the only one that the school funds. All the other films come out of funding comes out of our pocket. So they do it every year. It's called location filmmaking. It happens during interterm, in between the fall and the spring. So we shoot in January, and it was during my second year at film school, and I knew about the competition. So I wrote a script, and they changed the rules that year. They were looking for two films, one that was VFX and one that was 3D. And I took a look at my script. I had already written it, and I had to choose: can I do a 3D film or can I do a VFX film? And what I ended up doing was all the visual effects that you see in the film, I added those afterwards. Okay. But with the script, the story that you see in the film, the finished product is basically what I had written. So I added the visual effects. I submitted it. Out of 75, it was open to the whole school. 75 scripts were submitted, and out of the 75, my script made it into the top 5. At which point I had to assemble a key crew, producer, an editor, sound designer, visual effects supervisor, and we had to pitch it in front of the faculty. There was 5 people on the faculty, and so we were going up against this filmmaker. He was an undergrad. I'm in the grad program, but he had already had a reputation at school as being, I had heard him being called the next Michael Bay. Okay. For your listeners who don't know who Michael Bay is, he does all the Transformers films. So that's the kind of filmmaker that this, the reputation that this filmmaker.
The categories were FX and 3D. Right. Wow.
So I put together my crew,
really
and
competitive.
It is. Yeah. And I put together my crew, and we're all, I refer to us as the Bad News Bears of Chapman. We're the underdogs. We're all new to the program. Nobody knew us. My team was international. My cinematographer was from Venezuela. My sound designer was from Turkey. My producer, she's an Angelino, but she's Jewish. And so is my visual effects supervisor.
That's interesting. Go on.
Yeah.
Because all the characters are Hispanic, inner city.
Right.
And okay.
And that was deliberate.
Uh-huh.
So it came down to the day that we were supposed to pitch, and we went after the next Michael Bay, his crew, and we're sitting in the lobby waiting for our turn, and all of a sudden we just hear an uproar of applause, and we don't know what's going on. My team and I, they're looking at me like, wow, we have to follow that. And then it dawned on me a few seconds later, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's only 5 people on the crew, and there's only 5 people on the faculty, the submission, the committee.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounded like it was like the whole auditorium was exploding, and I'm like, wow, these guys are like so sure of themselves that they're like self-congratulating themselves. And they walk out of the room, and they look at us, and it was like that Bee Gees song, "Staying Alive." They just walk out strutting, and
they thought they had it.
Yeah. So we go in there all nervous. I had never pitched before. And we did our thing, and I was kind of caught off guard because they didn't ask me many questions, and I'm the writer-director.
Mm-hmm.
All the questions were mostly towards my producer and my cinematographer, and I'm like, okay, that works for me because I don't like answering questions anyways. So after our submission was over, we all kind of went our separate ways. Everyone walked out of the pitch all glum.
Mm-hmm.
And about an hour later, I get a phone call from my producer, a yell at Vic. Hopefully she's listening. And she's screaming into her cell, into the phone. And I'm like, calm down. I can't understand the word you're saying. Like, she's like, we won.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, is there ever any doubt? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, thanks for believing in the script. And that's kind of the relationship that we had. She's a really good producer.
Uh-huh.
And from there, a couple of weeks later, we are on set. The way the production works is they give us 9 days to shoot this film. We shot 10 different locations, Irvine Regional Park, Santa Ana, downtown LA, Long Beach. And the experience was exhausting, to say the least.
I can imagine. And you did that in 9 days? Is that what you're saying?
9 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really good.
And then we screened it at the end of the semester. We had a big screening. Chapman has a state-of-the-art 500-seat stadium seating theater, and just to be there, and the whole auditorium's packed up capacity. We had to go up on stage and thank everyone, and it was so surreal walking back to my seat because my previous film before that had bombed.
Oh.
And so to be up there and kind of feeling a bit redeemed in terms of my work, and I was getting high fives in the aisle, and I was just like, wow, this feels good.
That's an incredible story, because sometimes people don't recuperate or come back after bombing like that. They'll just take it as a sign that that's not what they should be doing. But you came back and really conquered it.
Yeah,
that is good.
Bounce back.
That's good. Well, when I saw it, I was so impressed.
Thank you.
At first, I watched it a few times, and we actually watched it in the beginning while we were waiting for you. And my first impression was just, wow, this is really great. And then I had this feeling like that story is really incredible, in that it affected me. And so somebody was, I don't know, on some conversation via social media, somebody popped up and asked me a question or something, and I was conversing with them. And then I said, can I show you a video? You have 8 minutes. Sure. And I sent it to him, and I said, it's really compelling. And so, his reaction was, that's really deep. That was great, And so I said, yeah, I'm interviewing that guy, But the thing was that, if you're watching the side and you don't know what we're talking about, when are you going to something that doesn't bomb? We're talking about The Good Man, which is
a good man.
A good man. That's even better. It's just a good man, not a good man. It's like
because there's more than one.
Every man kind of represents a good man. That's really neat. So I don't want to tell the story. I want people to go and watch it. And so I do have the link here on the side. If you scroll up, you should be able to see it. Let me see if it's still here. In fact, I could probably just paste it again.
It's actually, for your listeners, it's actually screening tomorrow as part of a showcase in my hometown of Bell.
Wow.
It's the first time it's going to screen in Bell, so I'm excited about that. My family's going to be there, my brother, my nephew, my niece-in-law, and the baby.
Oh, wow.
So I'm excited about that. Yeah.
I'm going to
bring it home. Bring it on home.
Whoops. Okay, so it's pinned in there, but you can see what it looks like at the top. It is very good. Is it good? I wouldn't be talking, well, we're not talking about the one that bombed. We're talking about the good one.
No, I don't talk about that film anymore.
I'm not going to ask you about it. But so this is, it's not coming up where I can do the link. But if you scroll up, you'll see where it's a link, and you can open it right now and take a look. But I will put that, actually it is on the website too. I might as well stop and take a moment and say thank you so much for being here. If you're watching from MsMeliz.com, I really appreciate that. But come on over to Blab. You won't be on screen. It'll just be like watching it from the side, and you could put in some comments and ask your questions. And if you're watching the replay, thank you so much. You're going to love Gary Alvarez. We're going to get a little deeper and ask some more questions about what he's doing and why and who he is. And then maybe some fun questions like what he just likes to do, because I understand he's a big Dodgers fan.
I am.
Yeah.
True blue.
Yeah. All right. That's excellent. And so what's really nice is that I see some people popping in who are other filmmakers and people who are interested in the industry. And if so, I'm really glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. This is a special episode of Tinseltown Tonight. I regularly air on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. right here on blab.im and on MsMeliz.com. And I interview people who I think are inspiring and who are living their life with purpose and passion. And so I found that to be true when I met Gary Alvarez on Facebook. I got one of those little pop-up messages that you should know this person, or do you know, and we had a few friends in common. So I checked out his bio and thought, oh yeah, he looks interesting, filmmaker. That's cool. And I sent him a friend request. And most people just decline or accept friend requests. Very few will send a question back and kind of screen the person. And he did. He sent back a question like, well, how do I know you? And how would I, how do we know?
To be honest, I couldn't remember if we had met in person.
That's what it was. It was had we met in person.
Yeah.
And, because of those people in common, I think that those are people that I know from going to events and going to see performances. And so, there's a chance that we had been at the same place at the same time. But once we got to talking, we really hadn't. The truth is that, we just have similar interests. And I think that's what's amazing about social media, and what I love about, and what I do as this is my hobby, is meeting people and talking to them, and finding like-minded people and interesting people and nice people from all around the world. So normally it's, big time differences and talking to people from different countries and trying to coordinate online meetings. And so rarely do I have the wonderful opportunity of meeting someone from my hometown, from Los Angeles, California, who's willing to come into my home and be interviewed live. And it did take a little coaxing, because the whole on-camera thing isn't really his style. But
I'm getting used to it.
I told you you'd like it. It's not bad. When you see the replay and realize, what I can do with the video, because I like to edit it and take up, make little small videos. But some people enjoy watching or listening as a podcast to the whole conversation, and it could be pretty fun. So I've got this G. Lewis. I don't know. Do you know Gary? Are you a friend of Gary's, or you just happen to pop in? Let me see here. This is always fun. 113 Days on Blab. George Lewis. Not following him, but I am now. Could be a troll. I don't know. It seems like he's interested in film. That's cool. We do get trolls sometimes, but yeah.
What is a troll?
A heckler, someone who's in there just to stir things up and maybe makes a lot of comments or asks questions that could be rude or racist or biased, or and if sometimes the comments are a little unwieldy, so we just block them, and if they get rude, we just kick them.
Okay.
Then they can't come back.
Trolls are out there
everywhere, and in real life.
Yes.
So there right now I just have live watching is Cindy, and Cindy has hosting, so she can kick them if we need to, so I don't even have to worry about it. Multiple people can be in control. I don't have to go into detail about it, but if you're ever interested, I would love to show you the ins and outs of how to use Blab. And I think you should be, because it's a really great platform. And even you could have private meetings, and just have your team on, and it's like a webinar or something like that.
Yeah, I'll look into it.
And it's nice because you could do it via your phone,
right?
Yeah, or iPad or whatever. So moving right along.
Yes.
So film school, creating documentaries. I mean, that is something that you're good at, that you learned. But why? Why did you want to go into that to begin with? What steered you towards the school that you went to and the education that you got when you were younger?
Well, my filmmaking experience, or my career actually, began in 2005. I'll have to go back a little bit. I traveled cross country across Mexico from Tijuana all the way to Tulum, which is on the East Coast in the Caribbean. And it was shortly after my father had passed away, and I needed to get away again. And I had a lot of questions, and I couldn't find the answers here. And I felt like I needed to hit the road. Very much inspired by Jack Kerouac's On the Road, and instead of going from across the U.S., I decided to go across Mexico. And my intention at the time was to write a manuscript for a novel that I wanted to publish when I got back. And when I did come back, I met with a friend of mine who was just starting filmmaking himself, and I pitched him the story, and I shared him my misadventures. And
I love the way he says misadventures.
Yes, it was full of misadventures. And his response was, "Hey, this is a very cinematic story. Maybe you should turn it into a screenplay." And I had never written a screenplay before. So I ended up enrolling at Long Beach City College. They had a screenwriting program.
How old were you at this point?
25.
Okay.
And so I just took an introductory intro to screenwriting workshop, and I managed to write about the first act of the screenplay, the feature screenplay, so about 30 pages. And I enjoyed it so much that I thought, well, what if nobody wants to direct my screenplay? I better learn how to do it myself. So I took.
This is a man after my own heart. I like to do everything myself.
There's some things that I like to do, and there's some other things.
Really?
So that I would rather not do, but. So I took a production class workshop, and I enjoyed that. And then afterwards, I was like, well, what if nobody wants to edit my film? I better learn how to do that myself. So I ended up enrolling into a post-production workshop, and I realized very quickly that I'd rather not edit. It's not my thing. But I stuck with it, and I ended up producing.
Film editing I like, but I wrote a book and I couldn't edit. And I can't edit anybody else's book. I'm the same way. It's just something about that critical sense, especially of your own work. Maybe I think I can relate to.
I think for me it was more. I was kind of traumatized by the experience, in the sense that like I was editing my own work, and then I kept making mistakes, and I would start over. And then somebody told me, "Have you heard of Apple 8?" Wait, is it Apple 8? Apple Z. I'm sorry. For your Mac listeners, Apple Z is the command for undo.
Right.
And I did not know that.
Oh yeah, it's Control Z on mine.
So when I found that,
go back one time.
Right, and I was really frustrated with the experience. And then afterwards, I realized every time I'm editing, my mind is like, I would much rather be writing, which is what I feel most comfortable with. Yeah. So long story short, I ended up writing and directing a few films, and I ended up applying to film school. And I got into Columbia. I applied to all the big major schools.
Did you already have a degree at that point?
I had my BA in Chicano Studies from Berkeley.
Yeah. Okay. So that's when you went to Berkeley. So now,
as an undergrad.
So you just kind of started again.
Not really, because in between, after graduating from Berkeley, as I mentioned earlier, I had been teaching primarily history, world history, and when I tell when people
surprising, is it?
When people say, well, how'd you go from teaching history to film school? It's
I can see that.
Yeah, right? If you think about what history is, it's just one long story. And filmmaking is just telling a story using pictures. So it wasn't that big of a leap for me. Yeah. And so I applied, and I got into, I applied to UCLA, USC, AFI, Chapman, and Columbia and NYU. And I got on the wait list for Columbia, and I got into the wait list for AFI. And I was seriously considering AFI, which is here in Los Angeles. Columbia is in New York City. and then I got into Chapman, and so I asked AFI, can I direct? Because I had gotten into their screenwriting program, and they said no. And Chapman said, well, you can write and direct.
Oh, there you go.
And so from there, it was just a no-brainer. And I was just like, well, I'm going where I can do both. And I can own my own films, too, because some of the film schools don't allow you to own your films.
Can you give any advice to someone who wants to go to schools like that, but maybe can't afford it, or, doesn't see it in their future? Because so many people, I mean, you seem like somebody who just feels like, okay, the world is open, I'm going to go, pursue that. And I have college age sons, and I feel like I tell them the world's open. You can do whatever you want. There's a will, there's a way. But they're always kind of, these stumble blocks. We don't want you to have to pay for that. We don't want to have to get loans for that. I don't qualify for scholarships. And to me, I'm like, if you have a dream, go for it. Don't wait till you're in your 40s to learn that. So what drove you, and how did you manage to do all of that?
Well, it goes back to me being raised. My parents, my dad basically was laissez-faire in terms of raising me. His thing was go to school and stay out of jail. And those are the two things. Parenting. Yeah, very simple. And I managed to do that, and I went to school. He said, don't worry about the money. We'll find a way. I'll take care of it. And my dad worked for 40 years, to support us. So I that was always ingrained in me, like, go to school, go to school, go to school. As far as the loans, I'm not going to lie, I'm in debt probably for a long time. And that was a big issue for me. That was the deciding factor of whether or not to go to film school. And I had spoken to people who were in film school, people who had graduated from film school, and everyone said go, except one person who said, it wasn't worth it. And I had to take into consideration where he was career-wise at the time. He had just graduated from UCLA, married, and had just had a child. Oh, and right. And where he was working wasn't. I mean, he was in the film industry, doing some editing, but he had gone to film school to write and direct. And I had to take that into consideration why his response was, because he has, a huge commitment to raise a family. I was single at the time, unmarried, no kids. So that was an issue for me. So, I just took a leap of faith and I just jumped, and that's just kind of in my character. Like, I just go for things, like you said earlier, that if there's a will, there's a way. And what I tell my students now is, don't worry about the money. We live in the most wealthiest nation that ever existed, and there's money. And even though we hear in the media all the time that, there's no money for school, there is. You just got to find it, and you got to find mentors and teachers that will help you to find money. I tell them this too, now that I'm, in debt, and, kids want to know how they're going to do it. And I'm like, look, they can repossess. They can foreclose your home. They can repossess your car. Right. They can garnish your wages, but they cannot take away your education. Right. And whatever it is that you do, it doesn't even have to be film school, because some of my students don't want to go into film school. You always have that, and you always have that advantage over someone who doesn't. So at the end, for me, yes, there's a huge debt, but it's a win-win. And I look at it now, that debt as an investment towards my future. It doesn't have immediate returns. And that has also taught me how to value patience. I'm not going to be able to pay off this loan in the next 5 years, 10 years, but things will be coming my way. These promises will be materializing if I work for them.
Well, you've given so much. It's not, I think that you're writing and directing and you're producing these films and things that take into consideration, the message that you want to give. What I'm saying is, I think that you are doing something with your education, and you did it while you were in school. You could have made a film about anything, a transformer, whatever, not that that's bad, but you chose to give a really compelling story. And that is, that's your way of using your education as, a gift that you give back. Where, I love that anybody getting an education, I think, is good. But when you use that, what you're learning, and like, for example, I'll give an example of my son, who I'm very proud of, and I know a lot of people who are doing this, but he's in his third year of college, and at the end of this summer, he's an architectural engineering major, and he's taking a trip to Nepal, and they're going to rebuild a school that was damaged in the earthquake. Wow. That's cool. And so I get the chills every time I tell somebody, because it is very impressive. It has meaning. It's going to help him with his job. It's going to help him with his degree. And so, yes, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves with how much it costs, but we were going to make that happen. And then we're helping him with his rent, because, he didn't plan for that. So he didn't have enough in his loan to pay this upfront at the end of the year for next year. So we had to do a little shuffling, but I'm willing to do that, because, those are opportunities that don't come up all the time. And, so I believe that in giving as you're getting makes a difference, and shows. I work at a school where my own children included have scholarships to go to the middle school and high school. And the students are required to keep a 2.0 average or above, not very hard. Mm. And, but it's a difficult school, but, they're encouraged to do something while they're there, to make an imprint, to be good at something, to get involved in a club or whatever. And so, sports, my kids were mostly into sports, and my younger son's into drama. And so, it's a hard school. If you come out with a 3.5 or up, that's really good for that, difficult, challenging, competitive school. And if you come out with a C average and you've done so much and learned a lot, that's good. But if you're not trying and you're not doing, you're just taking the money and you're getting through and you're just barely sliding, that's what it makes me uncomfortable. So it makes me extremely happy to hear you say how much you did and how much you learned. And that's why I keep asking you, when was this? When was that? Because it's giving me a picture of who you are. And it's a really good picture. And you mentioned a little bit about your teaching, and I know that you are that you teach film studies to 6th grade students.
Film production.
Okay, tell us more about that. Isn't that awesome? Cindy's like, that's awesome.
It's a great experience. It's unlike any other experience I've had. So I teach film production through the Youth Cinema project. It's a program from the Latino Film Institute, which is run by Edward James Olmos. And I was invited by one of the lead instructors, Polo Munoz, who was on my show a couple of days ago. And I met him through...
Let's talk about your show, too.
Yes.
All right.
I met him through a mutual friend. Actually, the actor in A Good Man, Eloy Mendez, is a mutual friend. And we met at a Christmas party of his almost 2 years ago. And I don't know, I guess we kind of hit it off. And, he's a film producer. And I told him that I was a writer-director, not just out of film school. And we hit it off, and he invited me to Sundance that year to write for his magazine, Landscape Latino. And then when we came back from Sundance, he's like, hey, I teach, to children in underrepresented communities in LA and Orange counties. I would like for you to come and speak to my students, and I'm like, well, I don't even know what do you want me to say? He's like, just talk for like a half hour. And I'm like, a half hour? I'm like, what do you want me to say? He's like, just tell your story, And so I went, and it was such a great experience. It was a Saturday morning in Santa Ana, and the gymnasium was full of kids, and their parents were there, which is mind blowing. And I just told them my story, that I basically kind of a snippet of what I'm sharing with you, my life story. And afterwards, I got a thank you card from the assistant principal. And the words that I still have it's tacked on my board right in front of my computer at my home office at home. And it's just said, thank you for making the time, and, you're an inspiration, and this is what the kids need to hear. And in the 10 years that I was teaching for Downey Unified, I never got a card like that. So I was really touched, and Bola and I managed to keep in touch. I started writing for that magazine for a little bit. And when the summer came, he's like, hey, would you consider coming and teaching, the kids, and being a part of the staff? And I was like, yeah, I would really like to do that. So I started in the fall of last year, 6th graders in Santa Ana, mostly Raza, brown kids. In Santa Ana, 6th graders. The program we travel to campuses as opposed to having a home base.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And we have schools in Santa Ana, in Duarte, in El Monte, downtown LA, South Central, Pasadena. The program's expanding. There's going to be more schools and more students.
Is it LA Unified or is it
No,
magnet kind of? How does that work?
It's all public
schools.
But we're not part of the district.
In their own districts or smaller districts.
Well, there's LA Unified and then Santa Ana Unified. The cool thing about the program is that we're not owned by any of the districts.
Okay.
It's run through the Latino Film Institute. So it's kind of an outreach program, but it's not an after school program. Like Apollo and Jessica Just and the people that are involved have managed to convince the school district and the superintendents this is not an after school program. This needs to be part of the curriculum. So we go and my students were with them from 8:50 to 10:20, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
And basically the goal, the mission of the program is to teach literacy, communication skills, how to read, how to write, teamwork, leadership skills. And on top of that, we're teaching them marketable skills that they can use when they graduate if they pursue Hollywood and doing film. And in the back of my mind, I'm working with these kids and they're making films. And I'm thinking, wow, in 10 years, these kids are going to be in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And all this nonsense that you hear about Oscars so white, it's going to be a different hashtag. Who knows what it's going to be? But we're changing the face of the industry from the bottom up. And being a part of that, going every day and walking into the classroom and hearing the kids go, Gary, it puts a smile on my face. And at the end of the day, it's like, wow, like I feel like I'm a part of something outside of myself, something bigger. And I'm looking forward to these kids, doing their own films, pursuing. I already told them, if you need a letter of recommendation, if you choose to go to film school, I will personally write it. You can come on my sets and crew. They're actually going to screen their films in June at Creative Artists Agency, which is one of the big agencies in the industry. Basically, they rep people like Edward James Olmos, Will Smith, Tom Cruise, the A-list celebrities. And so the kids.
When is that going to be in June?
June, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's June 10th. It's a Friday, mid-June. And so the kids, we bus all the kids, all from all the districts. And I went last year as a guest, and I had never been to CA before, and I know what it is. And it's like walking into the palace of the Wizard of Oz. You're just like blown away, and all the glitz and the glamour. Yeah. And then you go into this private screening room where A-list celebrities have sat, and you're sitting there, and you got all these kids, and they're watching their names on the big screen for the first time, and they're all excited, and they're like screaming and laughing, and it's just like, wow. It's unlike anything else I've taught for 10 years for Downey Unified, and nothing compares to working with these kids.
And these are 6th grade or 6th?
My students are 6th graders, but we do elementary, middle, and high school.
You do.
So there's like a whole track, I don't want to call it a track system, but we cover all of it.
You do. I have, I work at a school, middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So I'm that age, especially the 6th graders. Just prepubescent, but so adult-like. They're like just little adults. And they're wonderful. I love them. I love, working with teenagers too. But there's just still something so fresh about a younger person because they're smart. They're so smart, and they're willing to ask questions and willing to help others. I love that. So. It's in high school when they start to close down, and they're really in their heads.
Right.
But so that's pretty neat. And I would love to connect with you again and see, what you're doing with them. And I don't know, maybe even introduce you to my students so they can see what you do there. Because our students are more privileged students. It's a private school. We have a huge endowment and we have a lot of scholarships. So you don't have to be wealthy to go to our school, but it is, a lot of people don't apply because they assume that they do. So, you know, we have a big outreach, and it's very diverse as far as there are people, you know, there are a lot of different color faces, but it's not predominant in that. But it's a school that I attended when I grew up. My husband went there too. That's where we met. And so our kids went through there. So there is that small town feeling and that feeling of giving back. And I think that the kids and the families are remarkable, you know, and there are definitely some people who, you know, are in the industry or are in a privileged environment. My kids have come home from their friends' houses and said, our house can fit in the entryway to their house, things like that. Yeah. And I experienced that when I was young too. And at the time I was the only Hispanic person in my class in my whole neighborhood. And my husband was the same way. He's Asian, and he, you know, there were very, very few other people that were, you know, like us. And then we had like one Black friend, you know, and one Jewish friend like throughout all of high school, you know, so that was really strange. And it's different now, but it teaches a lesson, I think, in that, you know, there are also people that come to our school who have very little, and they're living in an apartment or, you know, or coming from very far away so that they can go to school here, and that, you know, everybody's lives away from here may be different, but when you're all here, you're all learning and, you know, giving as much as possible. So that's what I liked about it then, and that's what I liked about it now. So hopefully my kids get that impression, and so far I think so. They're good kids. They like what they have. I mean, we've only lived here for a little while, but you know, it's just temporary. Everything's, when you live where you live, it's just temporary if you look at your whole life. So that you mentioned that you taught for 10 years before. Now tell me, that's going back a little bit to before film school. So how did you, that's where you were thinking you would be as a teacher?
Not at all.
No, you just
Not
said
at all.
It was.
When I went to college, I really, you know, I hadn't planned that far ahead. You know, my dad just said, go to college. And I'm like, okay, I'll go to college. And I did.
Did he go to college?
No, my father, he's from a ranch in the state of Sinaloa. It's called Tetaroba. It's close to Los Mochis for your listeners on the west coast of the mainland, Mexico.
Okay.
I think he got as far as maybe the 5th grade. So he never went to college.
Were you born here or in Mexico?
Monterey Park.
You were born in Monterey Park.
Monterey Park.
Okay.
And so, you know, I went to college with a lot of interests. You know, I didn't have a planned major. I was really interested in history, English, poli-sci, and creative writing. I had all these interests, but in the end, you know, I was coming up. It was very formative years in my Chicano identity, my Chicanidad, and you know, I picked that up. I inherited that from my older brother Arturo, and when I found out that UC Berkeley has a Chicano Studies program, you know, it just made sense. And when I declared my major, people were like, well, what are you going to do with that? And I was like, I don't care. I don't know. And I don't care. All I know is that I need to know this now. And when that time comes, I'll figure it out. So when I graduated and I came back to LA, that wasn't my plan. My plan was actually to move to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. But that didn't happen. Life, like you said earlier, it just kicks in and you got to deal with it and roll with it. And so when I came back, I had no idea what I was going to do. And I was basically, you know, recent grad, back home in Bell, unplanned, looking for work, couldn't find work. I ended up going back to my alma mater, Downey High School. And the vice principal at the time, Mr. Zamora, I still remember him. He was my history teacher when I was there. And I told him what had happened and where I was. And he's like, let me see what I can do. And, you know, it was through him that I managed to get a teaching position for Downey Unified. I started subbing. And later that was in December of 2002. So I was like 6 months out of UC Berkeley. And I continued subbing the next semester, and I applied to teach summer school that year. And this was right after 9/11. You know, I'm 23 years old. about 20 pounds lighter. And I show up and I applied to teach summer school.
Skinny, because he's a pretty slender guy.
Luckily, the camera's a medium close
Tell
up.
me about it.
And so I ended up applying to teach summer school that year, and I did, and that was an eye-opening experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not really. I had no experience whatsoever except those few months that I had been subbing.
And you were teaching history for summer school?
Yes.
So remedial.
World history and geography.
Yeah.
To kids who had obviously failed during the year. Mm-hmm. So my first day, I walk in, and you know, being summer school, and it's the kids who flunked, who didn't pass their class. It's not the most studious students, to say the least, and they're 10th graders. 15, 16, very rambunctious and just being kids. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I walk in, and a lot of times I would get confused with students. If it wasn't for me wearing a coat, you know, a blazer, you know, I could easily pass. Yeah. Not anymore, but because I have too many grades. But at the time, you know, and I didn't have that experience, and I couldn't command respect in the classroom. And so that first day of class, the kids were just all over the place. Right. Like, they didn't care. And I got so frustrated, and being inexperienced as I was, I'm like, you know what? If you guys don't want to be here, you can just leave. There's the door. And they called my bluff, just like that. Like half, 2/3 of the kids left. And I was standing there, and I'm like, wow, like, what do I do? What do I do? You know? And fortunately, some of the students stayed, and I'm like, I got a job to do, you know? So I opened up the book, and we proceeded with the lesson. And sure enough, about 5 minutes later, one by one, they started coming back.
Coming back because they want to get in trouble. And
that was my first day teaching world history and geography.
Wow. So you're such a great storyteller. I love it. It's so in your being, your fiber. But so you didn't have that typical teaching, student teaching experience. You went from subbing to summer school.
Right.
Did you get a teaching credential through that?
So what ended up happening is part of the reason why I moved to Long Beach was to go to Cal State Long Beach to pursue a teaching credential. Okay. And when I went to research about the program, I met with a counselor, and she looked at my transcripts from UC Berkeley, and she looked at all my undergrad classes, and she compared my transcripts to what the teaching credential program was requiring. And she's like, you're going to have to take all these classes. And at the time, you know, just fresh out of UC Berkeley, I had no intention of spending any more time in a classroom learning stuff that I already knew, that just because it wasn't on my transcript wasn't going to translate. And for me, that meant more time and more money. So I was like, okay, I'll think about it, and I'll get back to you. Eventually, I ended up just subbing throughout the district. I didn't actually enroll into the teaching credential program, but I managed to stay on and teach. And what I did end up getting was, it's called a 30-day teaching permit, which allows me to teach during the summer, because summer is only 28 days. So I ended up doing that for about 5 years. And then that's when I decided, okay, I need to change. And that's when I applied to film school. So I ended up going to film school, but I was teaching full time as a resident sub at Warren High School. And so my day consisted of teaching from 8 to 3 in Downey, driving from Downey to the city of Orange, where Chapman is, and going to class from 4 to 10 for 3 years straight. You know, and sometimes staying at school till midnight just to finish on the project. So I did that for 3 years, and I was just exhausted afterwards.
You are dedicated. You really are.
I try.
And just so humble. It's guy. I recognize that from, you know, just my first impression of you, but hearing all of these wonderful stories, and I can't wait to see what you're doing next. So I just have to ask you about one of your shows that you did. Your web series is called Scumbags.
It is.
Now tell me about that.
Well, your perception of me being humble might change after that. It's a comedy, so I'm glad that you laughed. Good,
yeah. Well, I hope so. Scumbags.
Well, it's
documentary about the scumbags of
life. It's a web series that I'm developing. I wrote, produced, and directed the pilot, which is now in post-production. I'm meeting with my editor next week to lock it, so that we can screen it and have it online in the summer. But it's basically what the title suggests, about scumbags. However, it started off as a comedy. I was on a feature set where I was the first assistant director, and that particular set, most of the crew were my friends that I had been making films for a long time. And so when you're on set, I don't know if you've ever been on a film set, you know, we have a lot of downtime in between setups, and we're all just sharing stories, you know, nonchalant, just a bunch of guys just telling stories. And, you know, there was a lot of scumbaggery going on in those stories. And somebody had this great idea. I was like, why don't we just shoot this and tell these stories? By the end of that day, we were up to like episode 150.
Oh my God, the ideas you had about scumbags, huh?
About scumbags.
So is it people who just are nasty, like to other people, or just get away with stuff?
I'm glad you asked that, because in the evolution of this series, what I wanted it to do, I didn't want to tell your stereotypical scumbag story about scumbags. For example, the most common one that people think of is the frat guy who ends up sleeping with all the sorority girls. And then when you pass out drunk, he does things that he shouldn't do, like draw penises on your forehead. I'm not interested.
That's a scumbag.
That is a scumbag. But I'm not interested in those kinds of characters or in those kinds of stories. So what I wanted to do was give my characters some depth, some humanity. And I wanted to make them everyday people that you could meet, you know, your neighbor or a teacher at school. So our scumbags are trying to be better people. So in the pilot, we meet them at the pilot.
There's no name for that, right? Scumbags who want to be better people.
Well, that's what they are, scumbags. You know. So in the pilot, we meet a group of ragtag scumbags who are at a meeting of Scumbags Anonymous. It's a support group.
Okay.
You know, where people who want to quit. And want to be better people. And so we go around the room and they introduce themselves, and through a flashback of one of the characters, we see him in action and why he's at this meeting. And for the first season, what I would like to do is focus on individual characters. So there's 6 characters, and there's a pilot, and then a final episode that'll tie everything up together and hopefully set up the next season. So a total of 8. And what I'm trying to do is, in that process, I think like the tagline of the show is "There's a scumbag in us all."
Right.
You know, I'm a scumbag. Obama's a scumbag. We all know Donald Trump's a scumbag. But the characters are all from all walks of life. We have a teacher, an elementary school teacher, a psychologist, a tow truck driver.
So they're all feeling remorse from hurting other people, or wronging other people, or themselves, or what is it that they want support on?
They want to that's a good question. So some of them are feeling remorse, some of them want to make amends. Not everyone is successful at that, and I think that in the process of them making that decision to be or not to be a scumbag in their daily routines, I'm hoping that we'll find some humor. You know, for example, when a lot of us get cut off on the freeway, road rage, you know, and we have an opportunity to do the right thing and just be like, okay, you know, he cut me off. Who knows what this person, he may be, you know, and having a medical condition, who knows? Or we can retaliate. Now, I'm not trying to, you know, stand on a moral ground and pass judgment on any of my characters, because the moment I do that as a writer, I lose my characters and their authenticity. I'm playing God and I'm manipulating them. So what I try to do is I don't judge them. I let them do what they do. Unfortunately, I've cast really good, talented actors who I don't need to do that. They just own the characters, and I'm just there to tell them, okay, here's the camera, you know, and this is a medium and or a close up, and these actors are really good. So so some of them are feeling remorseful. Some of them are early on in what we call the straight and narrow, meaning that they're no longer committing acts of scumbaggery. Some of them are fresh off the street. The teacher who's the leading meter. I'm sorry.
That's being a scumbag in the session or in the support group.
Yeah. There's one. There's one in there. His name's Jones, the tow truck driver, who he at the meeting itself, he's being a scumbag. So you know, it's something. It's
interesting.
A genre that I haven't done. I haven't done a web series before. I haven't done a pilot. Actually, I did produce a pilot in film school, but I haven't done a web series pilot before. I'm trying a different genre. Initially, I was pitching it as a comedy. it's now that it's shot and I've cut it, I think it's gearing more towards dramedy, where it has elements of drama and comedy. And so it's a new experience for me. You know, I'm putting myself out there. It's the first time that I'm producing a script that I also directed. So that's been a learning experience for me as a producer. And, you know, I'm just trying to go beyond what I did in film school and try something new. Whether it works or not, you know, well, time will tell on that. But it's been a good experience, you know, and, you know, hopefully it'll get some laughs once it screens.
That's fantastic. I think that's a great idea. I love it. It reminds me, I used to ride the train to work. I used to work downtown at US Bank building, the tall building.
Yeah.
And
the one with the crown, right?
Yeah, it's round at the top.
Yeah.
And so I worked on the 33rd floor at US Bank. And I would take the train from Chatsworth every day, and I would watch the people on the train. And while I watched these different people, I would think up characters for who they are and what they do before and after they're on the train. And I never wrote anything down. I just would have this little fantasy game of, you know, dissecting who the people could be. And if I had a series, it would have been people on the train, you know, and I think it's been done, but it just, to me, just people are so fascinating. And just by watching them, you never know what they are thinking or doing or what makes them tick. And so, I just, the scumbaggery, that's just really an interesting concept. I find it humorous. I think it's be funny, but I love that, again, it has a message. So I don't know. I know you have another event to go to, and it's 5:45.
I'm okay. Are we wrapping?
No, we're going to go in the last phase. We'll start to
No,
wrap
I'm in
up.
no rush.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, I'm really happy that this is going long, and I'm actually quite pleased that I don't have a lot of distractions with the people on the side, because as much as I love having an audience, this conversation is just so, like, it's more natural, and I don't have to keep talking to the people in the room. No offense to the people in the room.
Thank you
glad
again
you're
for the
there.
invite.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Are you feeling good about it?
Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me or any questions about the process?
I'm sure some will come up.
Okay. All right. I'm fine. I'm open to questions. So I wanted to get back to, let me see. We talked about your education and your background and what motivated you to do this, and some of the shows and programs that you're working on. And I wanted to get to more of a personal level. So you did say that you love anything that's creative that has to do with film, music, or books.
Yeah.
And one of the books you said in the pre-interview that you like is The Four Agreements.
Yes.
That book changed my life.
Mine too.
Love that book, and I recommend it to a lot of people. And when I meet someone else who's read it, it makes me really happy. When I first was exposed to that book, I literally bought 10 copies and had them ready to give as gifts to anybody who would be willing to read it or who I thought would read it. I just had those copies of those books around all the time, because it's so perfect in what it set out to achieve, which would be, to change your life. And it, so the principles are so simple, these 4 promises that you can make. And, I know instantly who you are if you list that as your favorite, especially since it's been a long time since it was out. So when did you come across that book? The Don Miguel Ruiz book called The Four Agreements. The
Four Agreements was gifted to me by an ex-girlfriend, actually, on my 34th birthday. And I was going through some hard times. And
how long ago was that?
That was 2 years ago.
Okay.
So very recent.
Yeah,
and I wish I had read it a long time ago. But I think that book is one of those books that finds you.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Mm-hmm.
And so it was gifted to me, and I didn't pick it up immediately at the time. But eventually I did crack it open, and she had a reason for why she gave it to me, and she figured I'd read it. And I'm a bibliophile. I do love books.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 2 things that you can gift me that that are priceless. And one of them is book, and the other one is music. So, you know, eventually I had some free time. I remember that summer I had some free time, and I cracked it open, and I read it from beginning to end. I didn't put it down.
Right.
So
you can read it from beginning to end. It's just probably a good 3-4 hour.
Yeah. It's very simply written. It's elegantly written. The prose is beautiful. And the moment he started talking about, this is the author, Don Miguel Ruiz, he started talking about Toltec wisdom. That just leaped out and grabbed me, because part of the reason why I went to Mexico City to study was to study, you know, Mesoamerican pre-Columbian cultures, and the Toltecs were on that list. So that just grabbed my attention. And so I just read it. And it's one of those books that you have to read more than once to fully grasp it. But I have managed to memorize the 4 agreements. Right. Number 1, be impeccable with your word. Number 2, don't assume. Number 3, don't take things personally. And number 4, always do your best. And I've incorporated that. That's
really good, because I always forget one. For me, it's like the 7 dwarfs. No, it's one of them.
One of the 4.
Yeah, I'm always like, wait, there's one. But it's good.
Yeah, and so I just incorporated into you know, a new design for living, for, you know, where I was at the time, and it just works so much and makes things so much easier. You know, especially the one about the 2 about don't assume and don't take things personal. Keeps me so much out of trouble. You know, and it causes me so much less heartache and headache, you know.
If you haven't heard these terms before, it's just worth just contemplating for a few moments. Think about it. If you don't assume that somebody else, whatever they're thinking, because you really don't know, and just let it go. Don't try to do somebody else's thinking. And, you know, you don't, what was the other one you said? Don't assume, and don't take things personally. Because, and I always remember the part where it's like you know, the world really doesn't revolve around you. And so everything everybody else is doing is not about you. It's everybody else is just worried about themselves and thinking that everything revolves around them. And so, you know, just to not, and it's a daily practice, a daily reminder. They did not say that. I think they thought that, but they didn't say that. And it's not about me. And they could be having a bad day. They could be having, you know, like whatever. And then that being impeccable with your word, the way he describes it in that book, and I haven't read the book for at least 10 years. Okay. So I mean, I was introduced to that book before I had my kids, and my son's gonna be 21. So, but the being impeccable with your word, the way he describes it is like how your words can hurt someone, that can stay with them and change their life. And once they're out there, even if you try to retract it, you can't take it back. And he describes a little girl who's singing, and the mother has a headache, I think. And she says, stop that singing. You know, she couldn't take it. And the little girl, who had a beautiful voice, never sang again. You know, and so because she didn't want to hurt her mother. And it's amazing how those stories, you think back to, I mean, I still hear a voice in my head screaming my name, you know, when I was in trouble or whatever. And that tone, you know, that was so hurtful. And I yelled at my kids when they were little, and I used to yell a lot. I had 3 little boys, and, you know, it was hard. But when I consciously stopped yelling and just took those principles into my home and my relationships, it changed everything, not just for me, but for them and for their relationships, you know. And it's so it's such a positive thing to not do something. So tell me more about your impressions of it in your life, because it's so valuable to me.
Well, I think that's where the humility kicked in. You know, I mean, I was always raised, I'm fortunate to have 2 loving parents, mother and father, who stayed married till death. My mom's still alive, and I'm very grateful. She's been very supportive. The only person in my life who's been there, other than my father, through thick and thin. But so they taught me early on, you know, to be humble. But you know, when you get to your teens and in college and all that, everything that your parents taught you or taught me went out the window, you know. And that book kind of brought me back to those roots of humility, of being humble, of being of service. to people in need. And for me, you know, I find myself thinking about those agreements every single day. Like, for example, even today. So when I left the house in Long Beach, you know, I said I would be here at 4, and I'm racing to be here at 4. And I was a little late, but I managed to be here, you know. And
remember what I said to you when you told me you were leaving and I asked you what time you're going to be here? What did I say?
You said, don't worry, get here when you get here.
Yeah. And I'm really clear with people that I'm not one of those people who's you should be rushing for. You just, you know, it works out.
But just being impeccable with your word, you know.
You wanted to be here at the time you said. I understand.
And it also includes integrity. You know, I work in an industry where a lot of times, you know, your word is all you have. And if you break it, you know, there are repercussions, you know, that are, you know, negative. And then also too, as a writer, you know, words mean something to me, mean a lot. And so to place value on the things that I say, not only, you know, on your show, but in the films and everything that I write, I try to be as conscious as possible, you know. So that's what the first one, you know, and you can't have the other 3 without that one. And in terms of, you know, not taking things, not assuming, that's the one that like saves me so much headache, you know. And getting back to what you're saying about most of the time people aren't thinking about me, you know, so like stop stressing.
And it's so simple. The solution of knowing for sure whether or not they are is by asking them.
Exactly.
Just say, what do you mean by that?
Right.
And what, you know, or what is your intention?
Right.
And it that is it's so powerful. And as just general stress relief, and look at how much you've accomplished, you know, in the last few years by living that example. And so it really you exude this sense of being a stand-up guy, and that's a really good thing. And I want to ask you this question: how do you feel about your community in the film industry as it is right now? Do you think that there are a lot of people who are stand-up people who have a good positive intention, or are there still mostly people who are in it for the money and the high life?
Well, as an independent filmmaker, I don't work from the industry in the sense that, like, I don't work at Sony, I don't work at a studio.
Would you if you had the opportunity?
Of course.
So okay.
I would because I haven't done it. And I'm open to that experience. So I'm not going to say no to something I haven't done. But being a part of that network, because I do go to a lot of fun. I went to Sundance, for example, and that's part of the industry now, even though it started off as the independent.
True.
You know, I'll use that as an example because I was just there in January. Yeah, I mean, Sundance is a trippy experience. You know, you're in the snow in Utah, far away from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Right, Park City,
but it's
Utah.
Like a Hollywood of.
It's like a ski resort for Hollywood.
Yeah.
And you know, the A-listers are there, the big dogs and the big wigs are there, but also, you know, the independent filmmakers are still there, myself included. And you will get that part of Hollywood glitz and glamour that is a facade. It's superficial, but I've kind of learned to take it in stride. It's part of, I say it's the nature of the beast. It's part of the machine that I've resisted for so long as an independent filmmaker, especially in film school, that I've learned to appreciate it for what it is, and to work with it and figure out, okay, this is a system. How do I use it to my advantage? So, for example, you said what I consider working at a studio. If Steven Spielberg would come up to me and offer me $10 million to direct Transformers 10, I would say yes, which I would not have said 15 years ago. But for two things: for the opportunity, like you said, that doesn't come around too often, and B, for the money, so that I can take it and make the film that I want to do. For example, a feature version of A Good Man. So
I could totally see Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks all over A Good Man.
Can we get him on the phone?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm going to be seeing a friend of mine who's Steven Spielberg's personal assistant. So
Wow.
you never know who knows who.
Right.
So,
and that's kind of the way that the business works,
yeah.
And the flip side of that is I have been working and networking with other filmmakers in the independent side of it through Sundance. And there's still honesty and there's still integrity and there's still filmmakers out there, myself included, who want to tell a good story.
Mm-hmm. Storytelling is like a big thing right now. That's like the word. Do you know that? Social media, especially, and marketing. Storytelling.
I'm learning the whole marketing thing. There's definitely value to that. But, we want to tell stories. And unfortunately, early on, we had to accept the fact that not all of our stories, not all of our films are going to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to find a way to survive. And that's part of the daily struggle. But the payoff is we get to keep our creative control, which is priceless. You work for a studio, you have to deal with all these execs are giving you notes and change this and change that. I had a meeting recently, not a meeting, it was actually a conversation. Somebody had seen my film, A Good Man, and they're like, would you consider casting somebody else? And I'm like, well, what do you mean exactly? And they're like, would you consider casting a white actor? And I'm like, well, if I do that, it changes it doesn't change the story, but it changes the film. And I think part of the appeal of A Good Man is that the actors are brown, but then they're like, well, don't you want to reach a wide audience? And I'm like, yeah, I do.
And that's why they
want to bring in, that's why a lot of films cast big names. That's why, for example, right now, Scarlett Johansson's getting a lot of flack for being cast as an Asian character when she's a blonde, blue-eyed woman. I don't know if she's a true blonde, but she's not Asian, obviously. And that happens, and as a filmmaker, as a creative person, the thing about the filmmaking is that there's two parts. There's the creative side, and then there's the business. There's a reason why it's called show business, and there's millions and millions of dollars. Captain America is out this weekend. It's already grossed $200 million, and it just came out Thursday night.
Oh my gosh. That's what I'm doing tonight. I'm just kidding.
So it's, as an independent filmmaker, it's like, how do I navigate those waters? And that's something that I'm learning, as I go along. And at the end of the day, having read the 4 agreements, remaining humble and remembering I have to stay true to myself, no matter what. If my film flops, which it's bombed before, or if it gets a positive reception like A Good Man, I just got to stay true to myself. Because once I start, and I have done this, where I start writing for a particular audience, my heart's no longer in it, because I'm like, this doesn't feel organic to me.
I'm so glad you said that, because I hear that a lot. Do this for your audience, or listen to your audience, find out what it is that they want. And it's all about marketing and building your brand, and building yourself and making sales and getting them to know, like, and trust you. And my feeling has always been, well, I want them to know, like, and trust who I am. So what I put out there is going to reflect what I like and what I do and who my values. And I'm hoping that they'll like that, and so there's a place, I think, for everybody. Even after all of these years of knowing about doing my best and believing that sometimes my best may not be your best, and my best maybe just the best I could do at the time because of whatever else is going on, I totally believe in that. But I've gone a step further and added sparkle. My intention for this year is to sparkle, which means to make it that much better, to do everything I can with an intention of being better than best, and put the quality finishing touches that you would, in essence, to make it shine. And so if this is my hobby, I'm gonna, maybe I don't have the money to invest in a lot of equipment or, editing software or whatever, but I'm going to use the best tools I can and to do a quality show, because I'm doing it. And if I'm doing it, I want it to sparkle. I want it to be really good. So I've never cared about that before. And when you're raising a family and working for, there's kids education and things like that. You don't always think about yourself and what you're doing and putting out there. You're just trying to get it done, go, one day at a time kind of thing. But now I'm really more about fine tuning and shining and making it an impact, but reflecting who I am, the whole, from the core,
Right. In essence, you're living the fourth agreement, doing the best that you can.
Right.
With the tools that you have, with the resources.
The best.
Yeah. And if you're anything like me, you always want to fine tune things, and you always want to go back and think like, oh, I could have done this better. And that's fine. I do that all the time. And then there's some times where I have to be like, okay, I'm done with this. I got to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And just keep going at it and putting out. I'm reminded by a quote by Andy Warhol. I'll paraphrase it because I'm horrible at quoting, but he basically said, don't worry about whether your art is good or bad. Let the audience determine that. In the meantime, keep producing more art, And that for me was very inspirational, because there's times, where you don't know if people are going to like it or people aren't going to like it. And if you let that get to you, for a writer, it causes writer's block. For a director, it causes anxiety.
Right.
And the worst thing, the result is that you just stop. And that's the worst, for me. And that's the equivalent of just being done and dead. And I hope to God, I have my ups and downs, but never to the point where it's like I'm completely frozen and immobilized. That's scary.
Right. Well, for me, I recognize this level that I'm trying to do my best and really shine. And then I'll start to notice things that I'm not doing very well. Like I still haven't done my taxes, and
I know that feeling.
It's like, and why every year I go through this process. I'm going to do it in January. Oh, I'll do it in February. Okay, now it's past the day. I'm like, oh, I have to do that. And it's so frustrating because I know that what my downfalls are. I know that once there's something like that, my house gets a lot cleaner, because I'll rather do that, which I hate doing, than the other thing. Yeah. Putting off, procrastinating, and just knowing yourself so much that even when you're living these things, there's still, these idiosyncrasies that come along, but not beating yourself up over it is part of, living this, what's the word that they use? The peaceful life. And serenity. Yeah. Just being accepting, I call it,
right.
Accepting of yourself, and it's going to be okay. There's tomorrow, and it's going to happen. And, it's always, things do work out. So let's wrap up a little. I'm going to do this. What is the definition of a good man?
The film, or just in general?
In general.
Well, if I can put it into context, so that film actually I dedicated to my father. You see the dedication at the end of the credits, which looking back, I wish I had put it at the beginning, but it's one of those things I have to let go. So when I, for me, a good man is someone who, I'm just gonna use my dad as an example. Someone who, sacrifices, sleep, in his case, his health, which I don't recommend, but he did it, to put food on the table. We lived in poverty by the federal government's definition, but that we always had a roof over our head. There's always food. The fridge was always full, which is why when I was younger, my nickname was Gordita. That was never an issue.
Yeah, I've heard that one too. Gordita.
So, and he would take me to school in the mornings when he had his day off, or my mom. And he worked literally. So my parents emigrated from Mexico in 1964. And he worked continuously until the day he retired, which is in April of 2002.
Wow.
And sometimes he had multiple jobs. He worked in a foundry for 20 years. So basically, for whatever, I suck at math, but whatever that time, those years, continuously.
45 years. Yeah.
And he did that so that, you know, me and my two brothers would go to college and not have to do that. And so, you know, you asked me earlier why I'm interested in going back to Bell. I have no interest.
You have two brothers?
I have two older brothers.
So you're the youngest.
I'm the baby.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't really consider
So I
myself
have three sons, so I'm always interested in that birth order.
Yeah.
I know which one you are now.
I'm the youngest. And you know, so I think about that, and I think about all the sacrifices that he made, you know, for us to have. It's the perennial immigrant story about chasing the American dream. He left. I visited his ranch, Tataroba, shortly before he passed away. The one and only time. I haven't been back since. And I saw what he had left, and I look back now and look at the things that I've done, and when I think about him, I'm like, he is my example of a good man. You know, not that he ever, for those of your listeners, not that he ever intervened during a mugging, which is what the character does in the film. Yeah. But all right, for example, that character, he saw that something wrong was happening, right? He saw a mugging at a train station on his way home from work, and he intervenes, knowing full well that there's danger. And he's got a family, he's got a daughter and a wife waiting for him at home who expect him to be the breadwinner, you know, and he just tries to do the right thing. You know, he intervenes on behalf of this young boy who's getting mugged in the train tracks, and he suffers the consequences. And he knows what those consequences are, but he does it anyways. You know, and that for me, you know, to put an abstract idea into something concrete, into flesh and blood, that character, you know, is personifies the essence of a good man, or it can be a woman too. You know, selfless, yeah, considerate of others, being of service to other people in need, and you know, living in an individualist capitalist society that I, you know, was born and raised into in the United States. I don't see that very often, and every now and then when that does happen, and like how you were saying about the sparkle, I see it. You know, I've managed to be in tune, and when I see it, I'm drawn to it, you know, and I see those people, and I find my way, you know, reaching out and introducing myself and saying, hey, you know, my name is Gary, and this is who I am. And oftentimes we click, you know, and those are the people that I tend to collaborate with, because we're on that, it's going to sound a little bougie, but we're on that plane, that spiritual plane, where it's just like, okay, you know, we recognize that there's some things that need to change and need to fix. Right. And so I just wrote that film. Like I said, it didn't have the visual effects. I wrote the story because I wanted it for it to be a standalone.
The only visual effect I can remember from really was that the blood going away.
The stab wound.
Yeah.
It does heal on its own. And then also when the camera goes into his up his nostrils and into his brain.
Oh, okay.
and we travel through the synapses of the brain to go to the memory.
That was pretty cool. Yeah, okay. That's really good. All right, another definition of what's a scumbag.
You know, I've been asked a lot that question, and we actually shot a promo where we have a scumbag on camera define what a scumbag is.
Okay, that would be good.
And so that's not out yet. So I'll paraphrase basically what he says, or what I think it is. You know, a scumbag is a person who does something that had they had a little bit, just a second or two to think about the consequences, they may or may not do what eventually they do. Right. I'll give you a concrete example. I mentioned earlier the frat guy. Donald Trump actually exceeds a scumbag. He goes into the realm of douchebag. Yeah. But in terms of one of the characters in the pilot,
doesn't think about what he's going to say.
Right.
Care about what he says.
One of the characters, he's a tow truck driver, and his scumbaggery, he abuses his power. So he tows trucks. He tows cars that shouldn't be towed. And when he does tow them, he goes through, you know, the glove compartment and he steals things. You know, that's another type of scumbaggery. And you know, when I was developing the story, I didn't want to make it characters all based on drugs and alcohol. So what I did is, as a source of inspiration, I took the 7 deadly sins, right? Greed, sloth, all of them. And then I wrote a list of people that I consider scumbag.
Interesting. Okay.
And on the list were lawyers, doctors, meter maids, and then before long, that list of occupations was double the 7 sins. And all I did was, remember in elementary school where you had 2 columns and you just drew one line to the other. So I would mix and match them, because like I said, the idea of a scumbag is, you can be, a homeless person on the street and be a scumbag, or you can be in the White House and be a scumbag. Right. I consider George Bush a scumbag, for just lying to the public, lying to my face and saying there's weapons of mass destruction that never existed. Now that's something that a scumbag does. However, you would not find him at a meeting of Scumbags Anonymous because he's incorrigible. Right. So the characters,
you would have a reason for everything, or not even care.
I just feel like there's some scumbags who don't care, and they accept it and they embrace it and they thrive on it. And I'm not interested in those kind of characters or in those stories. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. I love it. Okay, so what's next? I'm not going to make you define yourself, but I was going to say define Gary Alvarez. But think about that. But tell me what's next.
So what's next? So right now, like I said, the pilot is coming this summer. It'll be online, hopefully by the first day of summer.
Where is that coming from? I mean, how is it?
So I'm working on a pitch package. Once it's done, I'm gonna have a private screening for the cast and the crew, and then I'm working on a pitch package because I want to submit it to Amazon Studios, Netflix. Hopefully, we'll find a platform that'll distribute it and who'll produce the rest of the episodes. Eventually, if that doesn't work, it'll be online and we'll have a web series channel, most likely on YouTube. So that's what I'm doing basically every day. On top of that, I'm working on my next feature screenplay. And then I'm also in pre-production on the documentary that we discussed earlier. And I'm teaching my youth cinema project students part-time. And I also recently started hosting a radio show.
Really? Oh, wait. I did know that. That's the Persistence
of Sound.
Persistence of Sound. And you've spent a lot of 80s music and some I don't know, stuff I like. Not that I was surprised. Yeah, of course I did. Right.
Thank you for listening.
All this stuff. Thank you. I listened to it while I was writing a couple weeks ago, I think. And I was really impressed because I don't know what I expected. Maybe some hip hop or there's some hip hop, but I just heard a lot of older things that I liked.
Right. So, well, the tagline for the show is streaming the sonic spectrum. So I'm
on the spectrum. That's awesome.
Right. So the sonic spectrum. Every show is different. One day I spun a Juan Gabriel song and I dedicated it for my dad because it was his birthday on 420. And then last week, we have a guest DJ segment, and we had some Celia Cruz, followed by Public Enemy, and I've spun everything from jazz to Mexican corridos to house music to blues to rock and roll to funk to soul.
The day I listened, I think it was was it Police, or did you ever do some Police or some?
I haven't spun the Police yet.
Okay, it wasn't the Police then. Maybe it was. I don't know. Now I'm gonna forget. Because I'm like that. I'm like you. I'm like on the spot. I can't remember. But I just remember thinking, wow, this is my music. So that was cool. But I like everything. So that makes it easy too. I don't like country. I'm sorry about country.
I did spin a Merle Haggard song in homage when he passed away a couple of weeks ago.
No, see, that's okay. But have you listened to Hamilton? Or have you heard about Hamilton?
The play?
Yeah. And the music?
I have not seen the play. I haven't heard the music. I was talking with one of my guests who recommended it. I'm not a fan of the musical as a genre.
I understand.
Not that I'm opposed to it. Right. That's what I've heard.
Well, my kids, I had heard about it. I can't even remember now. Probably online. Somebody mentioned it, and I was heard about Lin-Manuel.
The producer,
Yeah,
director,
I
actor,
forget his name.
man of jack of all
Kids
trades.
are gonna kill me. Yeah, so he is very inspiring, and he's got a great message. And so I'd heard about him, and I listened to it, and then my kids started talking about it. My youngest son actually, and then my husband loves the musicals. He loves musicals, and he loves musicals that have music that he can relate to like that. So it was perfect. So we've really dove into to being fans of Hamilton. And I'm surprised that you're not really into it, because it does have a history, a historical background, American history.
Right.
And, it has person of color who's behind the direction of it, and very humble person too. So, you remind me, I guess, of him a little bit, and
it's
then,
on my list.
Yeah,
I'll get to it.
Yeah, I have something for you then. But, so anyhow, I don't know why. I like your music. I like that you do that. How did you get into that? And why, you don't have enough to do? I mean, people ask me that all the time, but, you don't have enough to do?
Well, it's every Wednesday.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a passion project, labor of love. What had happened was I was invited. So the radio station is based out of a little boutique shop in Boyle Heights called Espacio 1839. And this particular, I got invited to an open mic that they were hosting. And I walked into this boutique, and I had been there before, and they sell a lot of Chicano art and folk stuff and books. A lot of most of their stuff is Chicano themed and for the Chicano market. And I walked in, and it's a really small space, and in one corner they partitioned off this little corner of the room, and I noticed 2 turntables. And I've been spinning records since my days in Berkeley, so about 17 years, and that just caught my attention. And the guy, Marco Amador, who runs, it's a radio station, he happened to be there at the open mic. And I hit him up afterwards. I'm like, hey, I want to spin some vinyl on your turntables. And he looked at me and he's like, well, why don't you come by next week and I'll show you how to work the equipment, and you can have your own show. And I don't know if he took me serious or not, or if he was just brushing me aside, but sure enough, I showed up next week and he was there, and he's a man of his word. And he showed me how to use the soundboard. They have a soundboard there and 2 turntables. And he walked me through it that first hour. And at the end of that first hour, I was spinning my very first radio show, and I did that for 4 weeks by myself. I would come in every Wednesday afternoon with my crate of vinyl records, and I would just spin records because I'm a very tactile person. Like there's a use for cell phones and iPods and all that, but I like holding just as much as I like holding a book in my hand, I like holding vinyl in my hand. So
it has a resurgence right now.
The
sound is,
it's just part of growing up in that time. I inherited my brother's records, and he had a big stash and just spinning in college and all that, and parties. And so for 4 weeks I just did it by myself, getting used to the soundboard and the 2 turntables, and just kind of finding a groove, literally and metaphorically speaking. And then I decided, I had this flashback to when I was in high school, and I got a page from my best friend, Rodrigo Laredo. And he's like, hey, I got the new Stone Roses record. Come over to the house and let's listen. And who does that anymore? Who goes over and listens, and we spend all day. Yeah, you send a link and that's the end of it. And maybe they'll listen to it or maybe not. But in those days we would go, and we would dedicate a whole afternoon just listening to a record, an actual record that you can hold, And so that was the inspiration of the show, where it's basically, the difference now is instead of a pager, we have the World Wide Web, And so I decided to have a guest DJ segment called Patched In, where I invite my guests, who are all creative people, writers, musicians, filmmakers, poets, painters, bring them in with the top 10 lists of their top 10 songs. We share them online or in the studio on through the internet. And then in between songs, they share their story behind the song.
That's a great idea.
How it relates to their creativity or, the work that they do. And so this last Wednesday was volume 13.
And they stay with you the whole time. You go, that's the show, or is it a segment? How
It's
long
a
does
segment.
it take? How long are you on?
So Persistence of Sound runs Wednesdays,
persistent.
5:30 to 7:30, and then for the
Okay.
first hour, it's just me spinning records
So for an hour.
for an
you do
hour,
10
and
songs.
then no, well, it
And the
depends.
story.
And then in the second half, from 6:30 to 7:30, is the guest DJ segment. And that's when my guests come in.
So someone can listen to you every week live on the radio.
Internet radio.
Yeah.
The link is radiosombra.org.
Okay.
Is the name of the radio station, and the show's called Persistence of Sound, and it's also archived. I have a Mixcloud page where you can find them. I think
that's right. Listen to that. Yeah. Okay, and so and that's it. Those are the two avenues or two venues that we're hearing it. So you know, because I have a challenge for you, just if you can simultaneously use a Blab or some other, type of live streaming like Periscope or whatever, so that you can gain some exposure to people around the world who see those things, because that's a great show for something like sound, and people could come in and see it, be exposed to it that way.
I've never done that before, but I'm definitely open to it.
Yeah, I mean,
I just got a new phone, and I was looking at it earlier today because I noticed I've taken a few pictures. It's a Samsung phone, and I noticed that it doesn't have a Carl Zeiss lens, and when I look at the pictures, they come out blurry. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it. It's not an iPhone. I tried to get one recently, and I couldn't afford it. So I got this one. I don't know, but I'll definitely look into it. You know?
Well, you might be able to do it with that, or if you know anybody with an iPad or just your computer. But you know, it's if you have like a laptop that has a camera, that's how I started. I used a laptop for the first year, just using a little webcam in it. But yeah, it's a really great world. We'll talk about it some more, about social media and the connection with that, and the way the broader audience. I don't know if you have a statistics on who listens to this internet radio, or if you get any analytics about the viewership
through Mixcloud. They actually keep tabs of how many listens. Last I checked, it was like 300, almost a little over 300 listens.
Yeah, that's
good. In terms of minutes, it was like 3,000, something like that, which is not big, and I feel like it's growing with every guest. They bring in their audience to listen, and my next guest is actually a musician. His name is Quetzal Guerrero. He's based out of LA, and he plays an electric blue violin. So for your listeners, check us out next Wednesday. It's very interesting.
So what time is it at? It's Wednesday.
Wednesdays 5:30 to 7:30, and the link is radiosombra.org. So that's RADIOSOMBRA.org.
Okay, Radio Sombra. Yeah. So it's not just for people of color. It's for everybody. It's music. It's music that everybody loves, and it sounds that's 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, Wednesday evenings.
Right.
So I'm definitely going to tune into that. All color, she says. Yay, we're really into colors. My friend Cindy here and I are like really kind of enjoy lots of colors. And when you mentioned thinking about it in terms of people, I think that's pretty appropriate too. So that's cool. I'm enthused that you're doing that, because I think that's what I do. Like this show, it's usually once a week on Tuesday nights, like I told you. And I've been doing it now for about a year and a half. I think I've done about 70 interviews. And I know I have, because I keep track of this. I think you're probably 73. So but I haven't expanded on marketing it. I do it for me. And I have what I love about online streaming and about internet radio, whatever, like you said, is it still lives. When those episodes are always going to be there, and they build up. And so at any point, if I decide to put my full effort into this and make it my livelihood or whatever, I've got that stash. I've got that catalog of background. And like you, some of the shows that I do have more views because of who I'm interviewing. But a lot of times I don't look at that. I don't look at the numbers. I don't think about that. Yet I do Snapchat, I do Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Blab, Periscope, all those things. And with every one, I gain this little following, some that go to all of the things, and then some that are in each one. And when you see those numbers get into the thousands and tens of thousands, it is powerful. And you feel like, okay, I owe it to those people to do good things,
right?
And if it spreads beyond the walls here, then I'm doing good things, and that's kind of why I do it.
Right.
So it's not, I'm not in it for the numbers game. Sometimes people say, well, how many people, came to your Blab? Well, Blab is great. I've seen hundreds of people come in, and I've seen tons of conversation going, and you can have 4 people on screen at a time, and the conversation's like incredible, and people come in and out. And I think that's great. That's what it's for. But I like to use it just as the recording medium, because it's very good quality, and it works whether like you're here or you could be, like I said before, you could be in Australia, and it will still be just like we're talking, which I know that sounds pretty dumb, but it is still exciting. Technology blows my mind sometimes. So anyway, my point is that there are 3 people here. 2 of them are me, because I have both screens on, and I'm okay with that, because it's meaningful for me, and it's going to be on YouTube. It's going to be, we're going to share it. Oh, yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I have 79 subscribers.
Nice.
That's really good. It's hovered around 39 for a really long time. Like,
I should have wore a tie.
Oh, no, you look
I don't
great.
know I was going to be on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think there's a good chance that there's more people who are going to see your stuff than mine, because I don't know, you're the filmmaker, you're the storyteller, I
love it.
Yeah, I can tell. And I think that's really awesome. I don't even know how to wrap this up, because there's just so much more that we could talk about. But I think we covered everything. And we talked about your, love of books, and your love of music, and your love of storytelling, and your shows, and what you're going to be doing, and how it all started. I normally ask people what their core value is, but I think that we know by you telling your story about being a humble, good man.
I try to be, but it's funny that you mentioned that, because I do consider myself a scumbag too,
the truth comes out.
Well, I kind of had
Aren't
to.
We all?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the tagline of "There's a scumbag and a Saul." I've done things, that had I had some time to think about it, I probably wouldn't have done. And also because if you go to the Scumbags Facebook page, when we did our we did a fundanything.com crowdfunding.
GoFundMe kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a different website, and fundanything.com. And when I was writing and conceiving this, I had to put myself out there. If I wanted for the audience to engage, I needed to connect with them just as much as they needed to connect with me. And I didn't want to come from a pulpit trying to preach. So I had to put myself on camera. One of the rare times that I go on camera, and the very first person that you see in the promo video is me, saying, "My name is Gary, and I'm a scumbag."
Oh gosh!
And
I can't wait to see this.
It's it's humbling, and it's for me, and it's disarming for the audience, because they'll look at me and be like, "Oh, okay, he's not trying to preach. He's not, looking down his nose at us," which
judging.
I'm not judging
who's a scumbag and who's not, and why.
And it helps me not only as a human being working with other people, but getting back to what I mentioned earlier with my characters. If I judge my characters, then they're no longer authentic, and then I have the dangerous risk of losing my audience or losing the person who I'm trying to reach. Because when I watch films and I don't connect with the character, I tune out.
Mm-hmm,
You know, the story, like for example, I saw Batman versus Superman recently.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard a lot of people's opinions on that
And
one.
you know, I have mine, but I didn't connect with the characters, you know, and I'm a huge Batman fan. You know, I grew up on Michael Keaton Batman, and I connected with the Michael Keaton Bruce Wayne Batman, and I connected with the Christian Bale Batman and Bruce Wayne. I did not connect with this one, and you know, the film was subpar, you know. And I think, not only my opinion, but if you look at the box office numbers, it was a huge opening night, and then it just, you know, tanked.
And the word of mouth, I think, really.
So, you know, when I write my stories and my scripts, you know, I try to focus on the character, and I'm hoping that, you know, the audience will connect with the character enough to be engaged to follow the story. In the case of A Good Man, it was only 8 minutes. The challenge now is
you packed a lot into that 8 minutes, though. Wow.
And it was actually the original script, the shooting script was 16 pages. There's a lot that was shot that ended up on the cutting floor.
Yeah, because it had to be that short.
No, they didn't give us any time limits.
Really?
They actually said don't make it past 15.
Oh, okay.
And we had gotten to 15, but from what you write, and this is another learn, from what you write and what you direct and what you end up editing and screening, totally different things.
Yeah, really ends up taking a life of its own.
Yeah.
Oh, we could get going on that conversation, but so I have a question from the side that says, are you teaching and making films? Your teaching is a outreach. It's not a job, right?
I'm teaching part-time.
Okay.
Tuesdays and Thursdays in Santa Ana.
Okay.
The semester's almost over, so the kids are going to go on break. But I've been invited to come back next semester, and I'm being offered more classes. I'm open to it, and I said yes. I said, you know, the only caveat is I don't want the way the program is structured, as all the instructors are all working filmmakers.
Okay.
So if I get called to be on set and shoot a film in South Africa, I can go for 6 weeks and come back and still have my job. Okay. Because I'll be somebody else to sub for me.
Team kind of.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
So I'll teach so long as it doesn't not distract's not the right word. I don't want it to take away from my time and effort in filmmaking, because that's my first thing, my primary thing.
That's so, you know, you can do two things.
Of course.
It's a great way to give to the community and to help others. And I think, what is it they say, that you learn by teaching? You do better at your job. So before we really do end, I wanted to ask you a question that came up in a private group that I'm in on Facebook. And this is kind of goes to the social awareness. And this might come from a totally other, it may seem like it's totally off topic, but I want to see if you get my point about this kind of talk. So she says, I don't get that a Black woman's album can only be commented on by Black people, and that whites or other skin colors cannot have an opinion or write a review, only be an ally to be socially correct. So she's talking about Beyonce's Lemonade, where she wrote a review, and she's white. So she said, I guess she got some flack. So she says, why can't we get a message from Lemonade and share it? It's not like only white people can review white people's albums and that only women can get female artists. I don't care if it's a message. Anyone can have a reflection. I feel that it hurts any movement by making itself elitist. I didn't watch it, so I don't have an opinion. I'm not sure if she's talking about exactly there, but then she says, and I think this sounds horribly racist, I know, but I don't censor anyone for their race and hate being told my skin color disallows my opinion on a subject. Is it so much work it is so much work to try to be politically correct, and social media can be a tyrant for calling it out. What does that spur in you, hearing that in a conversation, a rant?
A lot, actually. You know, I've heard of Beyonce's Lemonade. I haven't seen the video. I suppose I probably should after this discussion. So I'll put it in a more general context in terms of I can't really speak on behalf of the Black community or the white for that matter, because I'm neither. even though people assume that I am white.
I get that too.
But I'll look at it from a social context. There's this issue of appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
And by appropriation, I mean one culture or one segment of society buying, consuming, selling aspects of another culture. Mainstream America, which is, I'm safe to say it's white America, has had a long history of that. In terms of music, most recently, you think of the most obvious one, Elvis Presley.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm a fan of, I like his music. I grew up listening. My older brother listened to Elvis. I'm not a super fan of his music. But he took, basic blues, black music, and
that's a good example that everybody knows. Okay.
Right.
I like that.
And he took, popular black music, the blues, made it safe. Actually, white people, the older people, were a bit threatened because it was so sexually evocative and provocative. But he basically brought the blues and rock and roll, which is black music, to a white audience. And then he had a very cunning and very sly manager who figured out a way to capitalize that and make him into the first superstar ever, really, if you think about it. And there's a long history of white mainstream America doing that. To this day, and even hip hop, Eminem, and I remember in high school, all the white kids, and this blew my mind. I remember in high school, a lot of the white kids were into hip hop, and I remember at the time Wu-Tang Clan was huge, and all these white kids were wearing Wu-Tang shirts and talking like the RZA and the Jizza and calling each other the N-word and just being like, I didn't really understand it at the time. I was only a teenager, but I felt like something was awkward about it. And
it seems so not right. Like,
I don't like to use the words right or wrong.
Do they know what they're doing? I don't
know. I mean, we're kids, and we're very impressionable.
It's subculture.
But as an adult, I look at it now and I'm super. Sometimes I'm a little ultra sensitive and acutely aware of that. I'll give you an example from my Chicano culture where we're appropriated Cinco de Mayo. Now it's all about Dos Equis and Coronas, and why. And this is the classic example. And I'm actually shooting a promo for Scumbags about this, about how white people, go to a bar and they put on their sombreros and their sarapes and they get plastered. They have no idea what Cinco de Mayo is. And that's what it's become. Another day for Corona and Dos Equis and all those big, alcoholic distributors.
This has not been sponsored by those.
No, not at all.
Like Halloween with Dia de los Muertos.
That's another one.
Huge, people get so offended with, people who using this as a costume, the makeup, and
For me, it's even more personal because last year I was invited to a Dia de los Muertos event in Hollywood Cemetery, and why it was personal is that particular year was Huichol, which for your listeners, Huichol is a tribe from the state of Nayarit, where my mom's from. Okay. And you may be familiar, they do very elaborate beadwork and it's colorful and it's beautiful. And that was the thing for last year. And, when I go visit my dad on Dia de los Muertos to visit his grave, it's a very personal experience. And I can't imagine somebody stepping on my father's grave. So when I think about that event at Hollywood Cemetery, and it's just packed with people, and it's a big party, and it's Dia de los Muertos. It's about celebrating life, even though we're at a cemetery, but it's not about that. All these kids do not have loved ones there, and they're stepping on people's tombs, and that for me is very disrespectful.
Yeah.
So getting back to your original questions, like there's a habit for mainstream America to appropriate another culture and feel like they can do whatever they want with it, and I think that's where Chicanos get offended, black people get offended. It's like, no, dude, like we have so little, and part of the reason being is because mainstream white America has taken so much from us. Now you want to take the little bit that we have. So, but I can also see it from the writer's point of view. It's like,
Aren't you entitled to have an opinion or to like something or to speak on their behalf? I mean, maybe not on their behalf, but it seems to me like you want to relate, and you're not even allowed to relate because you have to be so politically correct.
I don't believe in political correctness.
That makes that easier.
But with that said, you have to expect some consequences. And if you're going to have such strong opinion, if you're going to feel compelled to the point where you have to say something about Beyonce's Lemonade as a white person, even if you're in agreement, you should be prepared to answer these questions and state, like, why do you feel this way? And this is just from a creative person. You're putting your work out there, you're putting yourself out there, and you're going to get feedback, negative feedback, as well as constructive criticism. And as a creative individual, you have to be strong enough to roll with the punches, getting back to the 4 agreements, not taking it personal.
There you go. That's so true. Comes back to that.
4 agreements.
Because and then not assume what someone might have an issue or be provoked by something that you say, and you're assuming that is negative or classifying you, when it could simply just be an opportunity to express what you mean and to continue a conversation. So, that's how I would look at it. But I really appreciate your insights and experience. And I think it's extremely valuable. And thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you for inviting me.
Have you ever had an interview like this before?
Not like this, definitely. I've been interviewed. I've been on Twisted Fiction Radio, and I've been on KXSC as a guest. Totally different experiences. But I want to say thank you for extending the invite. Thank you for the hospitality. Thank you for welcoming me into your home. When somebody, invites you into your home, there's a lot of value in that, and that's coming from, Mexican parents who taught me, be respectful when you enter somebody's house. It's something to value. And I just want to say thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And I mean, it's not something that I do all the time. There've only been a few in studio, as I call it, but I love it as an option because it's quite simply easy for me because I'm right here and this is where I'm going to be. And I love it to share my environment and to put people at ease. Like, I know it's awkward going to somebody's house you've never been to before, we'd never met face to face. You called from downstairs, I'm here. My husband's there, like, who is this guy? Right. But sometimes I just have a sense that things are gonna be okay, and they always are. So it works out. I love it. And I'm glad that you're here. I mean, I would have done a quick 30 minutes if I didn't get that good feeling and just shoot you off. But, but it is, to me, it's just such an incredible value to learn about you and to get to know you. And I hope that we are able to maybe collaborate and, I'd be happy to promote all your events. I do a lot of reviews and things on my website of programming, and also of, like, I love red carpet events, anything Hollywood and Tinseltown's kind of my thing. So nice. I'm actually covering something tomorrow that is a gala event at the Skirball, and I hadn't been there yet. And it's honoring people who have given to an organization for foster children to help them to pursue a higher education and to get jobs outside of when they come out of the foster program. And I know people who are interested in doing that in different cities and states, but right here in Los Angeles, there's this organization, and I'm learning about it myself. I don't really represent them, but I was asked to do the media coverage, and so I'm looking forward to that. I'd love to have those opportunities. Yeah, there's a lot of community outreach that I am privileged to do through my school because I work in campus ministry. So we're the center for all the, community Christian service hours and things that the students have to do. And so that's a lot of fun. And then my family has a background in nonprofits. My brother works at Hope of the Valley. And so that's an organization that helps the homeless. And so, those are things that I don't always talk about on the show, but the opportunity, I think, to meet people who are doing good is what I'm attracted to. And but I really, my point is that what you're doing is meaningful because it can reach so many people through media, and that is something else that I love. So it all comes together.
Full circle.
And the hospitality and the family thing. I mean, I'm looking at the time. I can't believe we've been talking this long. This is probably my longest interview.
Oh,
but
wow.
It's always hard to end something when you're in person too. But I'm supposed to make enchiladas tonight because my son wants his girlfriend, who's never had enchiladas, have my enchiladas, and I make them New Mexico style because my family's from Albuquerque.
Okay.
And so very southwestern New Mexico chili. It's got a different flavor. You know, that's kind of, I learned from my mom. There's a few dishes that I make. My parents both passed away, so I can relate to what you're talking about with your dad. And so once in a while, I like to make the stuff, and my kids will be, you know, I don't make it all the time, so they crave it.
Nice.
And then when my relatives from New Mexico come, they're like, we used to eat this every single day, you know, but, so to them, it's like the norm, but to us, it's like the delicacy, you know?
Yeah.
So I would have invited you for dinner if I knew you were going to be here this long.
That's okay.
Because I can put
Thanks
that
for
up
that.
pretty soon. And they're pretty good, if I do say so myself. This is like one of the few things that I make. And sparkles.
I love enchiladas. My mom makes some really good ones. Shrimp enchiladas.
Oh, really? Yeah.
She's from the coast.
I like seafood enchiladas. I really do. We have a Mexican restaurant here that has a what is it? Crab enchiladas.
I haven't had that.
That's really good, especially if you have a couple of their signature margaritas first. But I make stacked enchilada casserole. So it's kind of just like you can eat it with a spoon.
Wow.
It's totally different. Everything's layered like a lasagna.
Right.
So, but you can make in New Mexico, you would get them individually stacked, and we like them Christmas style, which is red and green chili, or with a fried egg on it.
Oh, I haven't had that.
They're really different, and sometimes they make them with blue corn tortillas. But so yeah, it's all fun. It's all good.
Sounds
we could talk about
delicious.
food for a while too.
You better get on it. I won't keep you much longer.
I know. I'm getting hungry. People on the side are saying, you're making me hungry. So gotta go. But thank you again. And I'm going to play the outgoing music just for fun, even though I'm definitely going to be editing this down and playing, replaying this. But we got to dance it out. Thank you so much for coming to Tinsel tonight and meeting my friend Gary Alvarez. And thank you so much for sticking with us for this long interview. Right? Awesome, huh? So see you at the regular time Tuesday night, 6 p.m. This week I've got Jenny Q and Vicky Pitch. So it's going to be girls' night. So come and check it out.
Thank you.